Welcome to Lighten the Legal Career Path. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. Whether you're a new attorney looking for inspiration or guidance, or further along in your career, wondering how to get to the next level, or someone that's just simply curious about the legal world, you're in the right place. We'll be talking to female and BIPOC attorneys not only about their remarkable stories of success, but the challenges they've faced along the way, the lessons they've learned, and their valuable insights about their career and the road ahead.
Audrea Golding. I'm a partner with the law firm of Fragomen Del Rey, Bernsen Loewy, and our conversation today is based on my own personal views and not attributed to that of my law firm.
So good morning, Audrea. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm really excited to dive into this conversation with you this morning and for our listeners to hear about your inspiring journey from Ohio to Jamaica to Los Angeles. Now you're in Silicon Valley and you've climbed the ranks to become a very prominent immigration attorney. And I'm looking forward to for our listeners to hear all about it. So let's take it from the beginning and just give us a snapshot of yourself, your background, your history, and then we'll dive in.
Sure, happy to do so. I will start by saying I am the daughter of Keith and Faye Golding. Keith and Faye Golding were a couple of young folks who left Jamaica in the 1950s and made their way to the UK, as so many Jamaicans did post-World War II. They completed studies. My dad did a degree in radiology. My mom was a nurse. And eventually they made their way to Canada. Did some additional schooling and work. And then they made their way to Ohio, and they had 3 kids. And, we thought that we would grow up in very rural Ohio. And I'm so glad that we didn't, because at some point in the early 1970s, my dad, who was working with USAID, doing important work around the world, went back to Jamaica and helped to build the first hospital in the western part of the island, formal mission hospital. And so that's how we all ended up back in Jamaica and spent 10 lovely years there. And while there, my dad then was recruited by a Canadian pharmaceutical company. We moved to Canada with that pharmaceutical company. As you can imagine, leaving the lovely island of Jamaica, going to Canada was quite a challenge, but it was meant for the best, to have the best outcomes educationally, et cetera, for their children. And eventually I came back, and I grew up in Canada as well. Went to college, went to law school there, and in my first year of practice came back to the US, this time to California, where Erica and I met back in Los Angeles several years ago. In between that time, I did spend another 5-year stint in Toronto in Canada with our law firm. And that's and then brought me back here to California. So it's come full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah, lots of immigration in the DNA, and that's how I think I ended up where I am. Is just starting from my parents having that very curious and well-traveled background.
Wow, and it's ironic that you ended up in immigration law, right? And I love that we kind of have parallel backgrounds in immigration, and parents immigrating and grandparents immigrating, etc. How do you think that sort of shaped your influence in choosing this practice area?
I think like most people going into law school at the time anyway, I didn't know that there was such a thing as immigration law.
Okay.
Certainly it was a lived experience, but had no idea going into immigration, into law school, that this was such a thing that one could do professionally. There was certainly no, you see on TV, there's courtroom dramas, there's, cops and robbers dramas,
Right.
but there's nothing about immigration law. I got into immigration because when I was at Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto, there was a program that was specifically designed as a 1-semester program just in immigration and refugee law. I had the good fortune of having some internships, and one of the internships that I had during that program was with a law firm that was the co-counsel way back when of my current firm. And so that's how I got my introduction into immigration, was taking that course, which was really opened my eyes to what that immigration law was all about. refugee law as well, but seeing the actual practice of corporate immigration, I would not have been exposed to it or really understand what it could mean as a practice until I got to that opportunity to be in that law firm.
Wonderful. And I think it's one of those practice areas that, like you said, is little talked about, and it's not really demonstrated a lot on TV, so people don't really know more about it. Now that there is sort of a difference, corporate immigration versus, the general immigration as well. Can you talk a little bit about that distinction? And you've been at your firm for, gosh, should I say over 20 years now?
25 years this year.
25 years. Wow, that's unheard of right now, right?
These
For
days.
anyone to be at a firm for 25 years. So, can you talk about the distinction and what's made you stay so long with this firm? I mean, you must absolutely love the firm and the practice, but I want to hear from you.
Sure. I mean, you're right. I mean, I don't say that there's a distinction between corporate immigration and immigration generally. I do think to be a good corporate immigration lawyer, you have to be a good immigration lawyer. When I got into immigration, it's fascinating because I think so many people, when you say immigration, they think of what's happening at the southern border in today's, world, what's happening on our streets in today's world. But really, there are so many aspects of immigration that people may not even think about. When I got into the practice, there were some people who just did nurses and physicians in immigration law. There were some people who just did academia. There are foreign student advisors that just do immigration to support, professors and academics who are, moving around the world. And of course, there's, your family-based immigration. There's
Right.
refugee law. There's so many aspects to it, and there's some people that are real experts in it. Corporate immigration really is, at the end of the day, you're still helping the same people make their journeys around the world, but it's really focused on employment-based sponsorship. What are those immigration options that are going to be available for companies, organizations, institutions, who are seeking to attract, retain talent from around the world. And, some of our companies here in Silicon Valley and across the US and globally for that matter, have significant percentages of their workforce that are on work visas. They're foreign national workers who they rely on because of the education and talent that they bring to the United States in our case. So really that's a distinction. It's those visa options or immigration options where a company or an organization is the primary sponsor for that person being able to work and remain in the United States.
Wonderful. And just to go back and ask another question, in terms of the arc of your career at Fragomen, how has it sort of changed from the beginning? Obviously, immigration law is fluid and constantly changing, as we all know. How has that? How's your practice changed over the last 25 years? I'm super curious about that.
In a lot of ways, certainly, it's a bigger practice than there ever was before. So I started in the firm in 2000. I think at that point we only had one foreign office, and I believe that was the Brussels office. We were very much well known as being the premier immigration firm in the U.S. and partly because a lot of other firms weren't doing it.
Right.
This was not considered to be a really common practice or one that one could build a career around in a lot of large firm perspectives. But it's changed a lot. When I came in, at the starting point, I'd had some small firm experience before, and as I mentioned, worked with our co-counsel before. But coming in, I would say, I was focused primarily on one or two large clients where I was working on the immigration program of a large multinational that, I would support the green card and the work visas for just that one company. Over time, your experience grows and your interests grow. And when I was in our Los Angeles office, developed a practice that was focused also more on entertainment related immigration. It's another whole aspect of immigration. There are folks out there who just do immigration work as it relates to foreign creatives and artistic types, and that was really interesting work to me. And so you it falls into a different realm of immigration,
Mm-hmm.
different client base, but always very interesting to see how much immigration influences our culture and
Right.
what we produce in California as entertainment. And then, after in 2014, my firm had asked me if I would go back to Canada. At the
Mm-hmm.
time, we had a practice there, and but there were significant demands just from a trade perspective for supporting Canadian companies that were doing more cross-border work. And I was able to take that opportunity because I had at that point had retained my Canadian citizenship, had retained my Ontario law license, and was
Oh,
able
that's
to move
good.
back. Yeah, it was a great opportunity,
Yeah.
and that came up, and I will say that those 5 years in that environment were my favorite years in the firm, in the sense that it was very entrepreneurial. It was setting up a new practice. It was bringing in new sort of attorneys into the firm that helped us to develop that real niche of cross-border support for
Mm-hmm.
companies primarily based in Canada, but others as well as a U.S. consular practice, which really focused on those people applying for visas at U.S. embassies and consulates in Canada, but up and down, the Americas. So it was a very niche. It was another niche area of
Uh-huh.
practice that I felt like I hadn't really spent as much time in before, but that really helped me grow in terms of my expertise and experience in the cross-border side. We see that becoming a little bit more popular or important now with all the tariff discussions
Right.
and companies, needing to figure out a way to continue to move people and goods and services across the U.S. with the impact of tariffs that are looming. So the things that you take for granted were in the past are sort of now being talked about again, and how to solve for those things. And then eventually I was asked to come back to the US, and this time Silicon Valley, which was a very different experience from, California, obviously from Toronto, a very different marketplace and culture
Mm-hmm.
and certainly what we see and what we think of as a big tech now has
Right.
its own sets of demands when it comes to being able to support the large number of talent that and people on visas that really run the Silicon Valley economy, right? The talent and all of the advances in technology that's happening now, particularly with AI. The foreign worker population is what is really driving and spurring that ongoing growth in the U.S. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's interesting to be in the heart of it again, of what companies are doing to really retain that top talent that's spurring all of the growth that we're seeing in artificial intelligence and those types of fields.
Wow, and there's so much in that, and thank you for kind of going through that. So it sounds to me the reason why you've stayed so long is because of the different opportunities, right? The career path has still been very dynamic even within the firm, and you've either raised your hand for those opportunities or you've been tagged for those opportunities within the firm that's kept it interesting, right? That's why you've been there for so
Yeah,
long. That's one.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's a great part also about being in a multinational firm and being in a
mm-hmm.
global firm, right? Where there are opportunities, even if you are sitting behind your own desk, in one location, you still have the opportunity to collaborate with people all around the globe. But it's the opportunities also come from movement, and as a firm that like basically is really in the midst of mobility. We also try to make sure that we are leveraging mobility in a way
Right.
that helps the firm to keep knowledge flowing around the firm, keep talent moving around the firm, but then also supporting our clients who need us in various places.
This show is sponsored by Roundhill Legal Search. For the past 10 years, Roundhill Search has been placing attorneys of all levels with our trusted clients, from AmLaw 100 firms to the solo practitioner. Visit us at roundhillsearch.com for more information, to find great legal talent, or to step into your next legal role. I would imagine with this current administration, and there have been waves over the year where it has been, harder, easier to, get various immigration status. How difficult is it right now for you on this corporate side as well, with everything going on with the new administration?
You know, it's difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was not something that was unexpected, and that's one thing that I think as all immigration practitioners know. I mean, you prepare for what you know is to come, right?
Right.
So essentially, the current administration made it very clear during the last election what their mandate was going to be as it relates to immigration. And so those things are those commitments, those mandates are actually being followed through on, and probably triggered by certain things that I think that people perceived of what was happening in the U.S. with respect to immigration. The difficulty with immigration is that laws and procedures and the bureaucracy has not advanced and has not moved
Mm-hmm.
in real time, in a way that it should. So we all know that Congress has not really focused on immigration and been able to reach bipartisan consensus as it relates to immigration,
Right.
to create new laws. We are still working with the same quotas as it relates to H-1B professional visa
Got
numbers
it.
as we did have 50 years ago,
Right.
40 years ago. So and we all know, just looking at the Labor Department numbers month after month, that the numbers of people being hired on a month-to-month basis over the last 10 years are way beyond what the quota of visas are that are available. So things just haven't moved
Mm-hmm.
and advanced in the way that the real world economy has moved when it comes to labor, and the need to keep people on work visas. And as a result, you get situations where then you have people moving, whether they're coming in undocumented, or in other ways, or people seeking to remain here. It's because there is a need and there's a demand for labor and there's a demand for talent that
Right.
otherwise can't be found. So it's something that I think we all prepared for, that mandate to sort of, quote unquote, crack down
Mm-hmm.
on certain types of illegal immigration. I think unfortunately, it certainly does impact families when folks that have not otherwise found a route to stay or remain legally, families are being impacted, et cetera. On the employer side, I think employers probably could do more to try
Mm-hmm.
and influence what's happening or what should happen from a policy perspective, in order to try and see how talent can be retained in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But those are some of the challenges that we help clients to work through. Is one, leveraging what's available today to keep your workforce in place and keep people in the U.S., but also to just use any opportunities that they can in order to inform policymakers as to what the impact is of this inability to move forward with some type of immigration reform. I think people are hearing more of that now.
Mm-hmm.
As they're seeing the impacts of how the U.S. Economy may be impacted when you don't have the labor that you need to keep business running. We're seeing that certainly in California,
Yeah.
with farms being impacted, agricultural areas being impacted, but certainly also tech. I think on the educational side and on the corporate side, people are very concerned with
Absolutely.
the decrease in interest in the United States of foreign students, for example, because of
Mm-hmm.
what is currently happening in the immigration forum. So, that will all, we've been through certainly spikes in immigration enforcement. We've gone through, more restrictive immigration periods, historically. And so I think over time, things may settle out, but it will take bipartisan, sort of, cooperation to
Right.
have a fix for what's happening in immigration at the moment.
Got it. Okay, so I'm curious as to, and for our listeners as well, just who are intrigued about this practice area but don't know that much about it. Give us sort of what is you're a partner now at the firm, obviously, so your role has evolved over the years. What does a typical week look like for you?
Geez,
I know I didn't ask you this one before, but I'll throw it
yeah.
in there.
I mean, you know, as a partner in the firm, it's you know, there's a combination of things that you're responsible for, right? You have your clients that
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to make sure that their objectives are met. You know, you're doing regular calls with your clients to make sure that you know, anything that is happening, and there probably isn't a week that is you know, where there isn't another announcement where you've got to communicate out this
Right.
happened, or my employees are asking me about something, and what does this mean for a program? What do I need to do? So you're constantly advising clients on how to adapt or amend their programs to make sure, one, that they're compliant, but two, their employees feel like they are being taken care of,
Right.
you know, by that company. So it's a lot of advisory work. You're troubleshooting. There is something that comes up with a particular case that you need to figure out a solution for. A lot of it is taking care of your people, your
Mm-hmm.
employees, or most important asset, right, within the firm. You know, along with our technology and everything else, nothing runs unless you have good people that are supporting the practice and are making sure that our clients are taken care of. So it's managing employees, but also, you know, mentoring them, having those one-on-ones with them, making sure that, you know, they understand what changes are that they need to be you know, learning about as well. So constantly developing the knowledge within the team. I sit on our firm's executive committee, so there are, you know, calls throughout the week that, you know, really we have to come together very frequently and make sure that we are keeping our fingers on the pulse of what's happening across the firm, making sure
Mm-hmm.
operations are running well, and addressing anything that comes up across the globe, you know, that impacts what's happening within the firm. Um, and you know, and then you just try to do things like this, right? Which is
Right.
making sure that you're getting out, being visible, but also being part of the community, being part of the legal community, making sure that people are aware of what you're doing, but also you're aware of what others are doing. You
Got
know,
it.
you know, you can't help your clients if you don't know what your you know, what your is happening in your client's business. I was at a conference yesterday, something called
Mm-hmm.
Create the Future Summit yesterday in San Francisco, and it was really, you know, the startup universe of founders and angel investors and you know, venture capital folks, academia,
Mm-hmm.
for persons from, you know, governments, local and foreign consulates. You know, really understanding what the ecosystem is like now, so
Yeah.
that we understand what our space is, or what our place is in the ecosystem that we work, and how we can support that. So it's a whole mix of things that
Got it.
you know,
That's great
get
though.
involved in every single day, just to keep, you know, we're learning as much as we are trying to help others learn. And so it's constantly busy. It's
Constantly
constantly,
changing and
yeah.
constantly busy. So this sort of leads into another question. So especially for our listeners, the importance of networking is huge, right? To continue to get out there. And you are sort of a queen at this, because I always see you on LinkedIn. I always see you've been somewhere, you're speaking at a conference. Can you speak about the importance of networking, the importance of visibility as well for the ones coming up behind us, and why that is so important, you know, in terms of opening doors, creating opportunities for yourself?
Yeah, that's such a great question. You know, it is something that I try to impress upon junior, younger attorneys, to really understand the importance of networking, and um, because it's so critical, not just to your career, but to everything that you do. And I've often said, you know, I would not be in the place where I was if I didn't learn that early on. And I think part of
Mm-hmm.
it came from my parents, to be honest. My dad was very active. He was, you know, involved in different associations. He was president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Jamaica, the Caribbean Pharmaceutical Association. So
He
I was,
modeled that for you.
yeah, I
Yeah.
was very fortunate that I was able to see that firsthand and understand what that meant. And how important that was to career. and coming when I was in Canada, again, very active after law school, involved in the Black law students and the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers. But when I decided to move to the U.S., I really did not know anyone here. I moved to Canada in high school. My siblings all came back to the U.S. for school. I did not. I wanted to be in Canada. That's where I thought I would spend my entire career. And when I was in law school, and I got involved in the National Bar Association. So when I decided I was going to move back to the U.S., one of the first conferences I went to was the National Bar Association. Met women from the Black Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, and the John and Langston Bar Association, and it was really that really helped me to acclimate, to get back into firm life, etc. I always say to people that in throughout my time, being as new as I was to Los Angeles, I did not go to law school in the United States. I was not a member of the sorority. I did not have a lot of the traditional contacts that people had from an alumni network, etc. in the U.S.
So you're at ground zero. You're basically starting from scratch.
You're absolutely right.
Yep.
Starting from scratch. Having that willingness to put yourself out there and to start saying, the network is important. It's, somebody in my very first firm in LA introduced me to somebody from who was at a firm. It turned out that this person that I interviewed with was the brother of somebody I edited a political science journal with at McGill. That was an alumni network that I was fortunate to find. He then introduced me to a gentleman who was in his firm that's from the National Bar Association. And some people may remember Ronald Coleman, who was the at one point president of the LA County Bar Association, passed away unfortunately recently, but he was somebody who also helped me have an opportunity in his firm. But eventually Fragomen did call, and I did go back into immigration. But when I was active in those organizations, I will say that I was sometimes the only resource that people knew that did immigration law.
Right.
And so a lot of the other attorneys, once they needed an immigration lawyer, the only person they knew from their network was me. There weren't too many other people doing it, and not too many other people putting themselves out there who did do it.
Yeah.
And so I've said often that there are people that I just had no business knowing, or no business being introduced to, or no business working with, that that I do know and I did work with, just because I happened to be in the network of somebody who did know that person. And so, I think it's so important, because you never know where your next opportunity is going to lie. You never know what that next person is going to, in your network, is going to be able to introduce you to someone who's going to help either help your career, help you be connected to a potential client. And just personally, so somebody who can help you navigate waters. When I was about to go to Toronto, I hadn't practiced in Canada. For instance, my first year of practice, the person that I reached out to and who gave me such great and sage advice was somebody by the name of Michael Lawson. Michael Lawson was the first Black partners, or the first Black managing partner of Skadden Arps in Los Angeles. And he was the one that I reached out to and sat down with, and he gave me, what those pearls of wisdom were that he had from his years of practice into going into a new, managing, opportunity, and what that meant and what to look out for. And, fortunately, when I was in Toronto, Michael actually also became ambassador to the International Civil Aviation Authority organization in Montreal. And so we were able to, collaborate while we were there. It was just fortuitous. But, it's one of those things where the people that you get to know in your network, at some point, and you also have to reciprocate, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
And that people that you want to be in your network, you have to bring value to them. But there's just so many opportunities that come about from networking. If we don't put ourselves out there, you just don't know. And I say to, a lot of young folks who contact me and want to speak about my journey, and say, like, don't ask me how I do it if you're not prepared to do it yourself. And I understand a lot of young people, have are exposed to a lot more things. They see a lot of things in the workplace. You and I, went through the workplace where we sometimes, pioneered or labored alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of had to grin and bear it. We came through
Right.
some of the negativity, some of the hardships of, being in the only one in our
Yep.
environment sometime. And we just had to work through it. But what I find has happened now is that, people have the comfort of being in their own home and being
Yes.
in a remote environment, and
Exactly.
and seeing everything they think they need to know on social media or online. And so that skill at developing your network is really waning, and they're
Mm-hmm.
not making the true networking relationships that they need for success in their career. And I really counsel people to avoid that and to stay away from it, because what you know is and who you know, and the genuine relationships that you develop can only come from putting yourself in
Putting
front of that
yourself out
person
there.
and
No,
putting yourself
absolutely.
forward.
Absolutely. It's interesting because I had a client who hired a couple of lawyers from Round Hill a couple of years ago, and they're not in the office. He said, I've hardly seen them in the office. They're not getting out. And I think that COVID did that to a lot of these
Yeah,
younger
for sure.
lawyers, right? Everybody's at home in their own little bubble. But it's a skill that just needs to be exercised, and it's a muscle that needs to be exercised, and it might not be comfortable, but you have to keep putting
You
yourself
have to
out.
do it.
You have to do it, because I don't think that doesn't. It's not one of those things where it's not relevant anymore. Those that do it, and it will be fewer and fewer, will be those that sort of climb the ladders, have the opportunities, that will be more successful as well.
Yeah. And it doesn't take a lot. I think people think that it takes a lot.
Right,
You
and it
know, I,
doesn't.
it doesn't. You can do it in a way that is that is most comfortable to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, growing up in the National Bar Association, those were people who I identified with, and they identified with me, and then, you become part of their network, and it's not like you're in an environment where you're not welcome, or you feel uncomfortable. There are always people there to help you. When I was in our Los Angeles office, one of the offices that we were in, I remember just, coming up the elevator a couple of times, and finally there's a guy, and we were in the elevator going to the same floor, and I, you know, said hi, see you all the time. What do you guys do? And he said, what do you guys do? And we talked, and he was a business manager, and they said, we do immigration. He says, I think I have something for you. And just
Wow.
from that one interaction in an elevator, that company was that gentleman and his company were managers for actors and sports folks, and some of the most interesting work I got was
Wow.
from him. To this day, like one of his clients that I worked through everything from getting his work visa to getting his citizenship, producing major shows in Vegas. It's those are just the things that you need to do to get out and out of your comfort zone and say hi. And it's as simple as that.
It's simple. So we're saying it's simple. Some of our listeners might be saying, yeah, it's easy for you guys to say. You've been in your careers for 20 plus years. Somebody at the very beginning, like when we say it's
Well, this was
simple,
years ago. This was not today. This
this
was like
okay, this is like
over
this is
a long time ago. I
okay.
don't believe I was even a partner then.
Okay, so what how would you tell somebody how would they get out of it, out of the comfort zone? Somebody who's like deathly scared of saying anything to anybody on the other, how do they do it? How?
It's no different than you and your girlfriends going out to a club on a Friday night and saying, I'm gonna get dolled up, and I'm just gonna go because maybe I might meet someone.
Right.
It's a dance, right?
Yeah,
It's no
absolutely.
different. You don't have to approach. I'm not saying that you're gonna wear whatever you wear to a
Right.
club. What I'm saying is that we do it
Don't
in other
overthink
parts
it,
of our
right?
right. Don't we do it in other parts of our lives?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and we need to do it in the places where we know that it will help us to be professionally successful in the same way that we're going to be personally successful. People describe it, it's like dating. When you go to a club and you're having this drink and you're by yourself, you're gonna see if there's somebody that think you might strike up a conversation with. It's the same
Right.
thing when you go to a bar association event. You may be there and you might see somebody else walking around and you don't know what they do. Look at their name tag and say,
Pluck up the courage.
We do. Yeah, but we do it in other parts of our lives, and there's no
Yeah.
reason why we don't feel comfortable doing it in a professional setting. Yeah, you might get, somebody might blow you off. Yeah, they might not accept your LinkedIn request, but
Right.
if you put yourself out there, there are 5 other people that you say that they're connected with that you may also, have a connection with, that you wanted to connect with. There's so many tools out there right now as well that allow you to have those initial introductions. But I do agree. I think COVID did stymie for some of our folks that were coming up in that, that 2-year window when, we just lost a lot of in-person interaction. But, I think we've gotten past that for the
Yeah.
most part now. It really is about finding the right place that, you can feel comfortable in to network, but it's critical
Yeah.
to your success.
It is, and even starting where you're comfortable, and then exercising the muscle of pushing yourself in places where you might be uncomfortable
Right.
to exercise that muscle. Okay. If you're enjoying today's conversation, please share with another attorney in your network and send us your questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. So let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit. I heard you in another podcast recently, and we talked about, you were talking about women of color and how we should all have, crisis management expertise on our resumes. And I love that whole reframe. Can you talk a little bit about that concept, number one, and then talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you've experienced in your career and how you've been able to overcome them? So I know that was 3 questions. Take it one at a time.
Sure, I'll try to remember them all. So it's something that came to me. I think it's true in that sometimes, as we talked about before, people feel like they don't have the skills, they don't have the experience, they don't have these types of things that they think will lead to their success, or that anyone wants to hear about, and therefore that's why they're not as networked as they should be, etc. Or when they're looking for opportunities, they don't have the experience, and therefore they don't put themselves forward because they feel that they're not equipped. And I said, I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we actually are doing and that we know about when we're putting ourselves forward. And so just, again, some very simple things. You know, when you think about what your work experience is, people think that it starts with, oh, what was my first job after college, or where did I get an
Right.
internship or something. But we can go way back, and we were probably doing some other things or other activities. I look at the backgrounds of some of the students, for example, that apply for an award that I set up at McGill University, and I see what these young people are doing, and they're just like putting themselves out there. They're doing so many things in the community. They're, when you think of what it means to run, like, a Black Law Student Association chapter.
Right.
I mean, that is some real work when you're dealing
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
personalities, right?
Yeah.
That is a leadership quality, and it's a leadership skill, it's about your experience in building coalitions and building collaboration, whether it's your group or some other group. Think of what you do at church. There are people who are very involved in their churches, and do a lot of work, and that is, you frame that as being, being able to, use your skills to support something in a faith-based organization. There's so many things that we don't talk about that we do and that we can leverage to really showcase our skills. And we think that it has to be in this narrow context of what a
Right.
law firm wants. And whether it's a law firm or something else, you have to be able to talk about yourself in a way that others do. And when I was in Toronto, I remember just looking, or a group of associates. It was very different. It was sort of like me coming to Silicon Valley. People saw me coming, and it was very. People are just not in a lot of scenarios very self-promotional, right? And not to say that, nobody should, I don't believe in being proud or too self-congratulatory, but in order to go ahead, you have to speak about your capabilities. And I remember, doing an exercise with some of the associates where I said, okay, write down on paper what, your experiences, your law school, et cetera. And these were like brilliant, attorneys. And then I showed them something from another immigration attorney and what he had on his website about himself. And it was just, the contrast of how a male talked about himself, and that he was like, the most glowing person out there. And I saw how reserved some of our, especially our women associates, were about themselves. And yet there was no difference in terms of where they went to school, what their experience had been, et cetera, et cetera. So people have, some people are groomed to be very, self-congratulatory and self-promotional, and some people just are not. And so I think we have to be very clear about what the skills are that we have developed, the resilience that we have developed over time with all of the challenges that we have faced as people of color, and understand that, sometimes it takes all of your might to sit on your hands and not object to something that's, that is, really pissing you off.
Right.
And to me, that's a skill, that you have the ability to maintain calm under pressure.
Right.
And then you talk about that in ways in which you have been compelled, or you've had to exhibit that skill. So I just think people need to think more fully.
Yeah. And creatively, right?
Pardon me. About what their skills are. And when I talked about crisis management, for me, that was really coming out of like 2020 and George Floyd, and realizing that, there were certain things that we have been, have had to prepare to deal with. Excuse me, in so many situations over the years, that I do think we have really strong crisis management skills, because that is, we constantly find ourselves in a place of crisis quite often, and yet we are here, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny because I was sitting at the breakfast table with my 13-year-old the other day, and she was having some challenges, and I literally grabbed the pepper, grabbed the salt, and grabbed anything I could find and put it in one line, and said to her, this is going to be your life, okay? You're going to come across obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, and you're going to have to navigate it, right? You're going to have to navigate all of these obstacles. And then on the other side, I had nothing there. And I said, and this straight line, somebody who just has this straight line, and it's never straight, obviously, but a straighter line, who are you at the end of it? Right? Who are you going to be at the end of it? With all these challenges, you're going to be such a resilient person. You're going to be stronger. You're going to be more creative, because you've had to navigate all of these things. And it was a visual, and I saw the light go off in her head. But it's so true. And to your point about crisis management, that's what it is. It's the navigation, right?
Yeah.
So talking about that, so the second part of the question was, what's the biggest challenge that you've had to endure in your career, and how have you been able to navigate it, or how did you navigate it?
I think there's a biggest challenge. I mean, I would say probably the biggest challenge has been around, really mobility.
Okay.
When I was asked to go to Toronto, I had just gotten married, and that was a challenge of trying to make sure that my husband, who was then facing a move. Again, he moved several times in his career, but facing a move away from his family, me being closer to my family, still in Toronto, trying to navigate that. But also working through what that meant, because I knew it was an important thing for my career.
Right.
Thankfully, he was supportive of that and understood that, and made that, that sacrifice to do so. And then 5 years later, coming
We're
back,
off again.
having to navigate that again. And it was difficult, because, and right when we landed was when COVID happened. And I had felt very optimistic about coming back to California. I felt, okay, I'm going to restart my networks. I'm going to, even though I'd come out of California for 5 years, felt like, this was going to be a really good time to restart, in a new place. And everything in law firms is about, as the partners, about your business development and what
Absolutely. Yeah.
look to bring into the firm. And here I was in another city that I'd never lived in before, locked down for a
Right.
year and a half.
How am I going to do this now? How am I going to do this?
And trying to do that. So, it was, those are the two biggest challenges I think that I've had is trying to navigate both the professional ambition and the professional goals and desires, but the personal, what that meant personally. It was my husband moving back again, which was, great. We were going to be closer to his family, et cetera, except for the lockdown. But then I was moving away from my parents just at a time as they were getting older, et cetera. So for me, I think the biggest challenge has been, trying to do all the things that you want to do and you're meaning to do as a professional, as a legal professional, as a partner, but trying to really balance that with
Right.
with
Your personal life.
personal life and the people that you care most about. So those are the challenges for me. I don't know that there's any real professional challenge. I mean, there are professional challenges every day, but nothing that I felt was insurmountable. I was listening to this thing. There's something that Melody Hobson, of Ariel Capital, there's a clip of hers that, when she talks about, her success in the investment world. And she said, anything that she has gone through in her life, the negativities, the challenges, whatever it is, nothing compares to what our people went through before. We're not in a field,
Absolutely.
bondage,
Right.
we're not, having to give birth to a child and go back in the field the next day. And,
Yep.
that's kind of maybe not a great way of looking at it, but
Well, it's a good way of looking at it because it makes you more resilient and it makes you think, you know what, anything that I have to deal with now is
it
very
pales.
minimal. It
Yes.
pales in comparison, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah.
Um,
In
I,
the
I,
in the immigration space, I say all the time, like, when people say like, well, how did this person get here or whatever, I said, you don't know what that person has gone through to
right,
get here. I said, just be thankful that you are not out there rummaging through the bushes for food and fleeing and dodging bullets, right?
right.
There are so many other things happening in the world, and so any challenges that we face as professionals usually are pretty, solvable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say, look, well, whatever challenge comes up, there are millions of people across the planet that would change places with you with all of your issues right
Yeah,
now in
you're
this moment.
absolutely right. You're
Right.
absolutely
So
right.
it kind of gives you perspective on that as well,
Yeah.
on any of your challenges. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. As the president and founder of Round Hill Legal Search, I've spent over 2 decades connecting with incredible attorneys day in and day out. I decided it was high time that we share some of their remarkable stories, lessons, insights, and inspiration with the world. Join us weekly as we have wonderful conversations with our guests, or simply a session talking about some career tips, advice for you as you light your own legal career path. Let's shift a little bit. I want to talk to you about authenticity in the workplace, how you've navigated that over the years. I know for me, from the beginning of my career to now, it's been very different, right? Where at the beginning of the career, it was sort of falling in line sometimes with, what the workplace expected. Mid-career, I've just bought my authenticity more. So talk to us about those that might be struggling with authenticity right now. And I think that we have a generation coming up that is intent on being authentic. I don't know that that's translated to legal yet, but can you give us your insights on that?
Sure. I mean, there's certain things that you can't wipe away, right? I mean, we show up as women of color in the workplace, and that's, that is a starting point. Means that certain people who have not encountered people who look like you and me, or don't necessarily have never really worked and have had their perception of what either Black women are or people of color are, shaped by media, et cetera, or culture, the popular culture, tend to not necessarily come into your space with the with an understanding, or have preconceived notions of where we are, and what our capabilities or competencies are. And that's just a fact of life. And so I think, as you come into law firm life in particular, oftentimes you feel that you may have to adapt to what that, dominant culture is. And I think, but I think I've never had the luxury necessarily of doing that completely. If I, when I was in California, people thought I sounded like very Canadian or Jamaican. When I was back in Canada, people thought I was like too American, and or whatever it was. And so, but you're just yourself. I'm an amalgamation of all of those things. And so, I think over time you do get more comfortable, because you have a level of experience, you have a level of, autonomy that allows you to be able to be yourself, and just say that, I am who I am. You take it or leave it.
Right.
I said, that podcast you were talking about the other day, I said, but it's really up to us to be authentic, because if we don't break down what those viewpoints are, or those misperceptions are of us. And, I currently have my hair braided.
I know. I wanted to say, this is the first time I've seen you with braids. I love it.
We've all gone through the hairstyles, right? We've all gone through the hairdos. We've gone through the natural. We've gone through the curly. We've gone through whatever. And I perm my hair when I want to perm my hair. But I said to someone recently that when I started braiding my hair again about a year or so ago, maybe probably a couple years now, I had so much travel, and I needed to do something that was going to
easy,
whatever shaves off 5 more minutes of my day.
I'll take it.
So that I can get to that next email is what I need to do. And so I did that. And I came into the office one day with my hair braided. Somebody hadn't seen my hair braided before, a young gentleman, and he said, "Are you playing undercover paralegal?" He was like, "Are you on the show Undercover Boss? Are you pretending to be a paralegal?" And it said to me that this person perceived that somebody with their hair braided can't be,
right,
or his viewpoint, and probably others around him, is not somebody who can be a partner.
Which is sad, actually, which is really sad.
Right. And so you constantly have to make sure that you are showing up with whatever makes you feel, your authentic self, and letting people know that that is a misperception, and that you can. So I've always been very proudly Jamaican.
Yes.
Heritage. Everybody knows that, when I was in Los Angeles, if we would have a Halloween party, I would come up dressed up as an Olympic track star with my colors, right? If you walk into my office today, the first thing you will see is a portrait of Bob Marley, because that's who my inspiration is. You will see different things that to me is very are very important, because that's how I came about. I'm not going to have a picture of, Abraham Lincoln or something up on the wall. That's not what inspired me. You have to really be authentic to yourself. Otherwise, you confuse yourself about what your true, sort of purpose is.
Absolutely.
And I saw it in my dad growing up. I saw it in my mom growing up. They, never altered who they were, what they were doing. They successfully raised 4 children. All with advanced degrees, and they were successful at it. So why try to be somebody else that you are not?
Right, exactly. Just curious, how did you respond to that individual? Did you respond? Because sometimes comments like that can catch you off guard, and there isn't a response in the moment, but did you respond?
Oh no, I respond and I just say, no, it's still me, right?
Okay,
that's not the way to look at it, dude.
Yeah.
But it's, it just tells you that in 2025 or 2024, right? This was, that you still have to really be, you have to acknowledge that there are still so many biases and misperceptions, and this is where, when you talk about that, the current generation of younger folks, where that is what they're up against, right? And that's why there's the fear of the networking, and that's why there's the fear of putting themselves out there. And if there's anything that I can do in the limited time that I have on earth, it's to say to people, it's okay. Yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable when somebody wants to come up to you and touch your hair.
Right.
But they still know I'm still doing the same job that I did yesterday,
Right.
right? I'm still the same person that I was yesterday. So let's get over this. And now they know that, yeah, the next person that comes in may not be, may not be the paralegal, maybe somebody else. But I learned my lesson the first time around.
Right.
So incrementally, we're all trying to make change, and that's all we can do for the
That
time
is
that
all
we.
we can do, step by step. So I know that we are on a little bit of a time crunch now, but there are a couple more questions I have for you. Um, Before we jump into Erica's Fun Five, which I'm very intrigued
Okay.
about on your half. So, what advice would you give to any of our listeners that are interested in immigration law? What are they going to need to equip themselves with to be successful as an attorney, as an immigration attorney specifically?
Yeah, I talk to younger attorneys about this all the time. I think it's really important to really consider if you're going to go into immigration law, you have to just be a good immigration lawyer. People
Mm-hmm.
always say, I want to do a corporate immigration and I want to do entertainment. Like, you can't do all of those things unless you have a solid understanding and footing of what it means to be an immigration lawyer. And so my view is that I think everybody should really start out being in those areas of immigration law that let you know what the law is,
Mm-hmm.
what the regulations are, what it means to follow policy memoranda, et cetera, that govern what you do. And so I encourage people to do removal work, or what we used to call deportation work.
Mm-hmm.
If you do removal work, you do bond hearings, you do family-based immigration, all of those things that are sometimes some of the most complex immigration
Right.
matters are what's going to give you a solid foundation in what immigration law is all about. And then you can transition into what the corporate side is, because that's where anything that happens on the corporate side is rooted in the same regulations. And I think it's really important that people understand that at the end of the day, there are company the people that you need to serve are the individuals who ultimately are the beneficiary of your services. The companies will always be there to and have that talent available, but you really have to understand what it means to help the people who are the beneficiaries, the person who's left their whole family behind in India, has
Mm-hmm.
been waiting 15 years for a green card. You have to be empathetic. You have to know what it is to support those people as much as the companies that you're retained by to support.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, let's hop into Erica's Fun Five in the last 5 minutes that we have left. Okay, so what is the best piece of advice that your mother or another influential woman in your life has given to you?
Besides,
Personal or professional, by the way.
you will get this one, Erica. Besides, you always have to carry some face to money when you go somewhere.
Right. Explain to our listeners what that means. That's a Jamaican term. Explain what that means.
So whatever you're going to, regardless of if you're going out with somebody who you think is going to take care of you, whatever, you always have to have your own funds to take
Absolutely.
care of yourself. Back
Yes.
in the day, that meant if you went somewhere, even if you were going on a date or something, you put something
A little
in your
something in your top.
to make sure you can take care of yourself and get home safely. But it transcends now the bigger thought of you always have to take care of yourself financially as a woman, I believe. And my mom always said you always take something with you to make sure you can take care of yourself. Don't
I love that.
rely on anybody else necessarily.
Oh my gosh, that's so Jamaican, and I love that. That's my I'm hearing my grandmother's voice when I think one year I'd said to her that somebody wanted to take me out for a drink, and she was like, "You can pay for your own drinks. There's drinks in the house. You make sure
Right.
you're independent. You make sure you look after yourself." I got that advice too. I love it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Okay, the most impactful book that you've ever read.
Oh, that's a huge one. So many things. Um, if I had to, there, and I don't remember the name of the author, but there was a book that I read once called Humanity. And it was really just about that humanity, and it was about just how to be a better human. And it just talked about different situations around the world where people were put in various situations where you had to make a choice about what your humanity was and how that gets translated. And I'll just give you one example from the book that kind of has always stuck with me. And it talked about, when during the Troubles in Ireland back in the day, some masked gunmen got on a bus, and you couldn't tell who they were, and they asked you to identify whether you were Catholic or whether you were Protestant, and people didn't know what to do because you didn't know who the gunmen
Oh,
were.
I see.
And it was just about whether people came together and decided not to out each other.
Right.
That was the most human thing to do, was to just all kind of try to preserve yourselves. And
Right.
did you think you were going to have the humanity for your fellow passenger on the bus,
Ooh, that's
whether
good.
you were going to try and save yourself? And that to me was one of the most interesting things I ever read about how you preserve everybody or do something for the greater good than trying to preserve yourself.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna have to try and find the author for that book. That sounds
I'll try and send it to you.
yeah. Okay, wonderful. Okay, what's one goal? You've obviously been very successful over your 25-year career. What's one goal that you haven't accomplished yet that you still plan on reaching before you expire? Again, personal, professional, or something you want to do?
So my goal in life is to return to Jamaica at some point, preferably in retirement, and to be to fulfill a philanthropic goal, to do something to give back to the place that I feel were the best years that the foundation of where I am today is in Jamaica, and something educationally. And I haven't defined it yet,
Right.
but that's my goal.
Okay, we should talk about that. That's one of mine too. Scholarship of some sort in Jamaica, educational
Actually,
scholarship. Okay, wonderful. Favorite quote and why?
it's going to be something from Bob Marley, and probably it's emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Love that. Hero or Shiro and why?
I have a few. Again, Bob Marley. I think quintessential person from a small island, racially mixed person like myself, had to make sure that you navigated the minefields of being accepted in different groupings of people. Ultimately became successful. Never stepped away from his authenticity. Spoke truth to power. And in a short lifetime, became so much more influential that his words speak beyond his death.
You're right. Huge
And
impact.
so yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Audrea, thank you. I know that time is money. You got to get on with your work and life. I want to say thank you for taking the time out to spend with me this morning. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me, Erica.
Thanks for tuning in and listening. I'm your host, Erica Moore-Burton. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure that you share and subscribe to get new episodes as they come out. If you're an attorney looking for new opportunities, head to www.roundhillsearch.com to get in contact with one of our recruiting associates. And don't forget to send your career questions to podcast@roundhillsearch.com. Until next time.